The Eye of Chaos opens your mind to possibilities, the likes of which you've never seen before. This is your rapid-fire meta report for Lorcana, week 2 of Archazia's Island. Today is March 16th.
So Sapphire Steel did represent the majority of the decks of any tournaments that it was involved in. There was Inc. The Invitational that happened there. There was the Hunter Burton Memorial Open, which is for a fantastic cause for people with suicidal ideation. And while the majority of the decks in all of these tournaments were Sapphire Steel, it only won one of the major tournaments. And by major, I mean that had more than 35-40 people in it. At the Hunter Burton Memorial Tournament, the winner was Amethyst Steel, a really fast deck that uses Giant Cobra and just collects lore as quickly as it can. At Inc., it was Amber Steel, a really fast low-to-the-ground Amber Steel that beat out the plethora, and I mean there's a lot. So while Sapphire Steel represented the majority of the decks, there was 19 of them at Inc. The next closest one in terms of number of times they appeared was Ruby Sapphire, which only appeared 8 times. And despite that, it did not win that tournament. It did not win the Hunter Burton Memorial Open. That was won by Amethyst Steel. It did not win the Inc. Invitational. That was won by Amber Steel, a low-to-the-ground Amber Steel. And the third large tournament, I'm double checking here for you now, give me 1 second. But the Playing Ducks Home Masters tournament, which had 128 players, the majority again of which was running Sapphire Steel. The winner of that tournament was Amber Emerald, known lovingly as Lemon Lime, a really fast Lady and the Tramp deck. No, lies. That was not the Lady and the Tramp deck. It was the Sing Together deck. It actually had no new cards from set 7. It's about a couple of sets old. It uses cards like Prince John, You Have Forgotten Me, and then it collects a bunch of singers. It plays Ariel to ultimately sing Under the Sea after hitting the board with Akita. So that is what won a very large tournament overseas. So we're seeing Sapphire Steel make a presence. There's no question that Sapphire Steel is the most unfair deck. And for those that don't know what I mean by that, unfair just means that it has the ability to play cards when it should not otherwise be able to play them. So Belle costs 3, but you can destroy an item to play her. So you should be able to only play her on 3, except you can play her on 1. Scrooge McDuck, you normally would have to pay 4. You can tap 4 items to play it for free. Tamatoa, you can quest with Tamatoa to play any item for free. So it is the most unfair deck, has the ability to play free things, a lot of free things, and still there are deck combinations that are able to come in and deal with that. So that's a pretty promising sign for the meta. That's not to say that there's not an issue with the cards, the Sapphire cards that came out this set. However, it does indicate that we might still have a little bit more to learn in order to keep shaping this meta. It's only 2 weeks old. It's not too late, and I do think that there's a lot of space for creativity to come in and to solve the problems. Sapphire Steel showed up the most, but it didn't win the most tournaments this week. No, it did not. It was won mostly by faster decks, more aggressive styles, and some discard styles as well. So things to think about as you think about what deck you should want to play in your next tournament.
Ultimately, the question you're really trying to figure out here is, what do I play? What do I bring to locals? What do I need in order to be successful in tournaments? And really, it depends on which tournaments you plan on going to. If you're going to Charlie's Collectible Show, for example, then you probably are going to want to have an answers to Sapphire Steel. If you're playing your locals, only you know them better. But let's say you are going to be playing at a major tournament this weekend. Taking a look at the win rate matrix, which is a tool that is available on Ink decks, what we find here is that the most played deck right now, overall, based on number of matches, is Ruby Sapphire, red-blue, the popsicle version, of course. And the overall win rate right now is 51% for that deck, with its best win rate going into Sapphire Steel aggro decks. The next best is 78% win rate, so it does very, very well into Steel Song. So if you think you're going to see Sapphire Steel or Amber Steel, you might want to play Ruby Sapphire. As we mentioned, the winner of one of the major tournaments this weekend, Amethyst Steel, is on that list as well. In fact, interestingly enough, it's had 163 matches in the last 2 weeks, and it's only gotten a 48% win rate. Which is about, 48%, 50 is kind of where you want to be. 55% or more of a win rate is considered pretty darn good. So 48%, honestly, that can vary. Now, what happens is it doesn't do great into Ruby Sapphire. It has a hard time against the Cogsworth version of Sapphire Steel, but it does really well into the Oswald version of Sapphire Steel. With 19 matches, it boasts a 58% win rate against that. So that might be a good option there. The Cogsworth version, as well as the aggro version of Sapphire Steel, boast over 55% win rates each. They do really well into the current meta, and you're likely you may want to be competing against it, but I think a legitimate question is, do I play as Sapphire Steel? I think that's a good question. The Oswald items version has a 60% win rate. The aggro version is 56% win rate overall. Cogsworth and Friends is 63% win rate. Oswald's worst matchup, though, is itself, interestingly, not the items version or the Oswald version, but the Cogsworth version. The Oswald does not like the Cogsworth version of Sapphire Steel. One deck that you may want to be on the lookout for, it has a 57% win rate right now. It does about 45% into Ruby Sapphire, so if you expect to see a lot of Ruby Sapphire, it may not be a good idea, but it does pretty well into the other matchups. It does okay into Sapphire Steel. It does well into Amethyst Steel as well, and that deck that I'm referring to is actually Emerald Steel Discard. So Emerald Steel Discard, any version of Sapphire Steel would do really well as well. And if you're looking for decks that answer Sapphire Steel effectively, you're really looking at those options there. It's either going to be itself, so you play as it, some version of it. If you think you're going to see more items, you want to play Cogsworth. If you think you're going to see more Cogsworth, then it may not be as good because that's a very different version of Sapphire Steel. But yeah, discard, and interestingly enough, even Sapphire Amethyst Blurple does pretty well into a Sapphire Steel meta. So those are the decks, according to Ink Decks, that have a pretty good win rate against those decks. So if you're thinking that you're going to see a lot of Sapphire Steel, consider taking Emerald Steel. If you feel comfortable, bring itself. So bring Cogsworth or bring the Oswald items version. And even Blurple might be a good place to be. Now, ultimately, what is the right deck you should bring to any tournament? My answer is always going to be the one you're the most comfortable with. Because a lot of things to consider when it comes to these numbers is we don't know what the skill level is of the players that are running those matches. Was it their first time running it? Are they only running those decks because they saw that they were successful in tournaments? And so that can certainly skew the numbers. And for 2 weeks, that is not a lot of data. It's some data. It could be informative, but it's not the ideal amount of data. You need like hundreds, as close to 1,000 matches between different color combinations for metadata like what Inkdex provides to be extremely valuable. I think it's better to choose things that you're comfortable with. If you think that you can make your deck stronger into Sapphire Steel, that's always going to be a better option. Don't get caught in the hype. Don't let YouTubers trick you, and don't believe that there's such a thing as a perfect 60 cards. There is not. The most impactful deck that you can bring to a tournament is the one that you are comfortable with, that you have the most reps with, that you have tweaked to fit in the meta. Period. That's the hill I die on, and that's the way it is. With that said, thanks so much for joining us on this, I like to call them a rapid fire meta review, and the reason why I call them that is because I've seen meta reviews that go like 40 minutes, so this one's nowhere near as long. If you got about a 10-minute meta review, give you a quick update. But thanks for joining in. Please don't forget to hit those buttons, like and subscribe and all that stuff that you're supposed to do. So do that. There is no Illuminati, and all bend their will to the eye of chaos. I'll see y'all later.